Hey guys, and welcome to the wrap-up. If you haven't been here before, this is the official Raptors Republic post-game live show where we recap, dissect, and have some fun talking about the latest Raptors game. Again, this is a live show, so if you are following live, you're going to see the best tweets, moments, and highlights flowing across the screen throughout the show. I'm your co-host, Sahal Abdi, and tonight, as always, we have my co-host here with me, Oren Weisfeld. And if you all could like, comment, and hopefully subscribe to the Raptors Republic channel, especially our reaction podcast listeners. I know Samson did actually let me know that some of the reaction podcast listeners are starting to tune in, which is cool, which is dope. We enjoy that. But again, this is the Raptors Republic live post-game show, so the likes and comments we receive are all much appreciated. Getting into the game now, Oren. Tonight, the Raptors lost probably the most ugly defensive game of the season to the Boston Celtics. The final score looked like an all-star game score, 132-125. The Raptors are now 17-19 on the season, 2 games under 500. They're 5-5 in their last 10 games, Oren. This was one of those games, Oren, where it was a 3-quarter game, to be honest. It was a 3-quarter game for Toronto. They looked really good for 3 quarters, and then it all just started falling apart. What did you think about the game?
Yeah, first of all, quick shout out to our good friends at RR, Samson and Lewis, who have a newsletter called Minute Basketball or Minute Basketball. And they're selling merch. They're selling these shirts, and also just subscribe. But these shirts, yeah.
Ooh. Is that Kyle Lowry in the middle?
Yeah. There's Jimmy. There's Kawhi here, Jimmy here. It's a cool shirt. So yeah, shout out our guys.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of the game, I think it's a good way to put it. I did see the structure of a meltdown started in the third quarter. I don't know if it was fatigue or just guys being asked to, play a big when they're not used to playing that many minutes. But mistakes just piled up defensively, like you said. And yeah, I think that's the story of this game. I think if the Raptors didn't turn the ball over as much, if they didn't commit as many fouls, or if they grabbed, better defensive rebounding, I think they would have won that game, because they had some great shooting nights from guys like Boucher, Stanley Johnson. Those guys shot the hell out of the ball, but defensively, just a lot of mistakes cost you in this one.
Yeah, I mean, Oren, one thing I noticed almost immediately with this game was the fact that, Toronto's strategy in this one was kind of their strategy in the last game, where it was Kyle Lowry and Norm are going to lead us. We're going to hope for a big game from Chris Boucher. We're going to run our sets. Hopefully this works out. But from Boston's point of view, I noticed that they were trying their best to have guys like DeAndre Bembry, Stanley Johnson, Terrence Davis beat them.
Mm-hmm.
You could even tell the way, Oren, they were structuring their defensive rotations. A lot of times you would see Bembry be that last guy to get it, or Stanley Johnson, or Terrence Davis. Speaking of Terrence Davis, he did have a little bit of a bounce-back game tonight. He had a pretty good offensive game, I'd say. Shot the ball really well compared to his last game, and really relative to his season thus far. But I thought this was interesting from Boston. They knew that the threats on this team were Lowry and Norm. They know Boucher will have his really good nights like he had tonight. And they let Davis shoot the ball, and Davis was the one that kind of made them pay. Stanley Johnson and Bembry, not really so much. Stanley hit a couple threes in this game. But, speaking of, the Raptors' offense, or actually their defense, Oren, I noticed probably one of the coolest things about this game was the fact that the Raptors forced 9 turnovers in the game, or actually in the first half, I should say. And when I went to the box score to check it out, they had 0 points off of those 9 turnovers. And we saw this a few games ago with the Raptors. When they don't take advantage of those turnovers, it doesn't end well for them. Turnovers, I always say, are extra possessions for the opposing team. They ended, with forcing 16 turnovers on Boston, ended with 14 points off them. A little better, obviously. But again, 9-0 in the first half, not as good. Oren, did you like Toronto's I guess if we can talk about one good thing that happened defensively was them kind of forcing 16 turnovers on Boston. Did you like that aspect of their defense? Because we're probably going to get into the 61% shooting from Boston in a second.
Yeah, I think the Raptors, especially in the first half, did a good job of kind of throwing different looks at the Celtics. I honestly don't know if it was on purpose or it just happened to be, but I don't know if the Raptors meant to switch up the pick and roll coverages all the time or if it was just happening, but they were doing it. And yeah, the Celtics, some of those turnovers were just really bad, and some of them were the Raptors actually putting pressure on the ball, forcing guys to make quick passes who I don't think were used to making such quick reads. So that was encouraging. But on the other end of the floor, I agree with your point. Boston did a really good job defensively. They funneled the action towards, guys like Stanley Johnson. They put a lot of pressure on Kyle, especially. And obviously he had 18 assists. So 19 assists, which I think is a
19,
record,
yeah, I was just
record
about to
for
correct you.
him, and tied the record for the franchise with Jose Calderon, I think. But yeah, so Kyle was incredible, but Stanley Johnson, Terrence Davis, even Powell today at times, they struggled when they were asked to create. And yeah, that was pretty smart from Boston. I think the only thing they did poorly was leave Boucher open on so many pick and pops. I think they would have, if they could go back, they would have maybe scouted that a little bit more, because it's weird that teams are still doing it. But overall, pretty good. I just, I'm actually encouraged. I think, yeah, I think, Terrence Davis, he had a pretty good game, like you said. I mean, he looked injured at the end, but he had a pretty good game. Boucher had a really, really good game offensively. Johnson actually found his stroke again, which he hasn't been shooting very well at all recently, but he found his stroke. Powell, Kyle, the team needs more they need more consistency from these kind of end of bench pieces, and at least offensively, they brought it tonight.
Yeah, offensively, and you can't even really complain, I guess. The Raptors scored 125 points, Oren, in this game. Just looking up and down the box score, Stanley Johnson was 5 for 10. He had 14 points. He played 36 minutes in this game, Oren, and I thought that was pretty interesting because he didn't really play much in the last game. Of course, with a guy like, Jason Tatum, you got to play Stanley a lot of minutes in this game. I mean, you don't have OG Anunoby, who has a pretty similar build, I want to say, to Stanley Johnson. OG and Stanley are almost built the same. Two guys that are big wings with long wingspans who, have a reputation in this league of being pretty good wing defenders. Obviously, Jason Tatum is Jason Tatum at the end of the night. He had 27 points. He was, I think he was a plus 20 or something like that on the game is what I read on Twitter. 12 rebounds from Jason Tatum. I mean,
he was the difference to me. Like, he was just hitting tough shot after tough shot. Even if Stanley or Kyle or even Watson had a hand in his eye, he was hitting those shots down the stretch, and that was really the difference.
It was the difference. And I think one thing that a recurring theme we start seeing with Toronto is the fact that almost every game they're, not leading in rebounds. I mean, it was 30. I think it was 39 to 28. Last time I checked, it was 36 to 27. It ended with 39 rebounds for the Boston Celtics, 28 rebounds for the Raptors. So a plus 11 for the Boston Celtics, and we're seeing it time and time again. We know the Raptors' strength isn't rebounding. We know they're missing a bunch of guys in this game. I'm going to quickly ask you this, Oren, because, obviously we're going to get into the game a little more, but are the Raptors' rebounding issues coming out of the All-Star break going to haunt them even with everybody back?
Well, I mean, in a way, like, even at full strength, they're not a good defensive rebounding team. But I think they're kind of willing to give up a little bit of that in order to, get more steals and play better offense with that small group. surprisingly, if you look at the numbers, the small group, the starting lineup with Powell, OG, and Pascal, they're actually rebounding the ball really well defensively. So I think it's definitely possible, and I think it's trending in the right direction when they're healthy in terms of guys just being more on a string, boxing out, being smart, and kind of rebounding together, even against big centers like Joel Embiid and whatever. They figured it out. They did a good enough job. But part of it is that continuity, where, you know, they need this time to play together more and
Yeah.
more, and figure out the front court and the gang rebounding stuff, the communication. That's all going to come with more reps together. But I think it's a concern for sure when depth pieces are being played, because we've seen this whole season, that's when the rebounding problems really come. It's easy to blame Baines or Boucher because they are the five, but really it's a problem when it's more bench pieces on the court and guys are just not boxing out, guys aren't communicating, guys aren't picking out, you know, Peyton Pritchard coming in from the perimeter to steal one. That's on Baines, but it's also on whoever guy Pritchard has, you know, whoever's defending Pritchard to call it out. So it's a mix of things.
It definitely is. I literally wrote down in my notes, Time Lord, who, for people who don't know who that is, that's Robert Williams. The five, I don't believe he starts anymore for Boston, but he's the five on Boston, and he is a guy that I would want to see on the Raptors so bad, Oren. A guy who's a really good interior defender, super high motor, high energy guy, long wingspan, can run the floor in transition, really good hands, almost everything you would want in like a prime Aaron Baines, but unfortunately Aaron Baines is not in his prime anymore. So, but that's one guy that, like, obviously Boston's not looking to get rid of him unless they're getting, someone back, and we'll get into that later in the GM segment. But another thing I wanted to mention was that in this game was Boston's, not just their hot shooting from the field, Oren, but their hot shooting from three. Oren, you're gonna have to explain this to me, because Peyton Pritchard always becomes Klay Thompson versus Toronto, but everybody versus everyone else, he's Jimmer Fredette. So, and then Grant Williams, who I personally thought, Oren, wasn't, that great of a three-point shooter, until I checked his season stats, and he's shooting 41 or 42% from three. Naturally, when you play with two isolation, based players like Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, you're going to get a lot of open corner threes. We saw it in the bubble. We saw it before, when the Raptors played them earlier in the season. Grant Williams is a guy that's always in the corner, and he's always open for three, and he always makes Toronto pay. What did you think about their three-point shooting and guys like Pritchard and Grant Williams specifically, their role players?
Yeah, I think generally it wasn't as open shots as we're used to seeing against this team. I think Toronto, especially for most of the game, they didn't make as much of an emphasis on just stopping Brown and Tatum. Like, usually they'll funnel tons of bodies towards them and just make them playmakers. But tonight they kind of said, like, especially the beginning, they dropped the big instead of meeting him at the line, which they did last time of the screen. They just said, okay, if you want to take the mid-range shot, we'll let you do that, but we're not going to let our defense collapse that quickly. So it wasn't like those guys were getting really open shots. I think they just, shot the ball well. That's going to happen. Raptors shot the ball really well from 3-2, right? So that wasn't the difference. Like, I'm looking at the box score right here, and the free throw discrepancy is what we got to talk about. And I'm not saying about the refs either. Like, I'm saying maybe a little bit is that, but 17 free throws for the Raptors, 40.
40, yeah.
So, Jaylen Brown is a good example of a guy who had a bad game. And I talk about this with OG Anunoby. I think he's a good example. Powell's a good example. When you're having a bad shooting night, you need to get involved. And Jaylen Brown, if I'm reading this right, had 16 free throw attempts in this game. That's absurd. But you could tell he made a point to just be super aggressive. His shot wasn't going down. He started attacking Boucher, Baines, whoever was guarding him in the pick and roll. And he just started getting to the line. And that's something I think Toronto's wings can kind of start to start to learn from?
Rarely ever, Oren, do you see a guy finish with more free throw attempts than field goal attempts. Jaylen Brown was 11 for 16 from the free throw line, and from the field, he was 4 for 11. So he shot 5 more free throws than he did shot the entire game, finished with 21 points, 7 rebounds, 4 assists. Jaylen Brown had a pretty good game, but Jaylen Brown's the type of guy where he affects the game in so many different ways. I don't necessarily consider him a very good playmaker for Boston. There's a reason why Boston apparently is looking for a playmaking or scoring wing to help them out, according to all the reports we've been seeing. But it's crazy. 40 free throws is absolutely insane. More than double the free throws that Toronto shot in the game. And again, this isn't a game where we're necessarily complaining about refereeing or all that. I mean, Toronto's defense was suspect at its best in this game.
Yeah.
I was going to say, Oren, you don't let a team shoot 61% from the field in this game. Stanley Johnson is a guy we spoke about earlier, who I said had a good game. He looked more decisive than usual. He looked good in his minutes. He brings kind of like a defensive stability, Oren, to the lineup that Toronto just needed for this game. But I noticed, Oren, that as great as Stanley is defensively at times, and this was a good offensive game, I mean, relative to the rest of the season, but in so many possessions, he played 36 minutes. So in so many possessions, it just felt like the Raptors were playing 4-on-5 at times. He was kind of giving me those Rondae Hollis-Jefferson vibes to him. Okay, I should probably ask you this. What are the positives and then the negatives you saw in Stanley Johnson's game?
Well, the positive was that his 3-ball was going, but it's true that they were playing 4-on-5 in a sense because Boston was just dropping so low. They weren't defending him at the 3-point line until like late in the fourth quarter after he had made a few. So Stanley's going to have to prove to each team that he's going to hit them before they're going to start guarding him at the perimeter. And that means the spacing is always going to be bad with him on the court until he can 3-point shooter. Defensively, I like his point of attack defense. I wish he gambled a little bit less on steals. And like before we get into some general game positives and show some highlights, like defensively, what I saw was just guys not trusting each other. And like the reason there was so many reach-in fouls, the reason there was so many guys going for steals and not getting it, the reason there was all these blocks was because they didn't trust the help behind them. And so they got really aggressive with whoever had the ball in front of them and made mistake after mistake. And that's just a cause of not really having, a backline defender or knowing who's beside you, not being used to playing these specific lineups. All that stuff, I thought the trust factor was pretty bad.
Yeah. I quickly, we talked about the defense, I think, more than enough. It just wasn't up to par tonight. Like I said, it was like an all-star game score out there for Toronto, allowing 132 points, 61% from the field. You just don't see that. I wanted to talk, Oren, a little bit about Terrence Davis. Terrence Davis is a guy that, like we said, like we scolded him last night. To be totally honest, we completely destroyed him. But to be honest, Oren, it was kind of
he deserved it.
He deserved it, right? So we were, when a game like that happens, you can only expect a bounce back game. It doesn't really get much worse than what we saw yesterday from Terrence Davis, and we did see a bounce back game, at least offensively. I mean, you still did see some, defensive like miscommunications, but again, chalk that up to the rest of the team. Nobody was playing great defense tonight. But his offense, his shot was falling, Oren. His shot was falling, and with Terrence Davis, it feels a lot like when his shot is falling, his defense is a lot more engaged. He just seems a lot more engaged in the game. He was absolutely destroying Boston's closeouts on offense. Terrence Davis looked much better tonight. I believe he finished with 20, I got to double check this, 22 points, 4 assists. And for a lot of guys that were in the negative in the plus-minus category for Toronto, he was even. He was right at 0. Only 2 other positives were Paul Watson, who only played 12 minutes, so obviously not a big enough sample size, and then Chris Boucher was a +2. We'll get into Chris Boucher later. But in terms of Terrence Davis, what did you see that you liked in this game?
Yeah, I mean, he was very active, more cutting than I guess I'm used to seeing from him. He got a lot of just layups under the basket from cuts, and the shot was falling. But I think he looks more important to the team just because we literally have no one who comes off the bench who can score consistently other than Boucher. Like Powell's a starter now. And so Terrence Davis has become this guy who we basically rely on to score. And when he's not hitting shots, the Raptors seem to really lack that punch from the bench. And when he is, they're boring games. But like that doesn't necessarily mean he is like giving them this great boost just because when they win, he seems to be the one of the guys providing the spark. I think they just need to keep searching this bench for some more. Like I think Malachi, when he gets back, he needs to be an option to get more time after he had a really good showing in the G League. I just don't think, no matter how good you can have games offensively, the true like mark of a star in the NBA is consistency in terms of your
Yeah.
scoring and then defense. Like Terrence Davis, we saw it last season. He's not going to be trusted in the playoffs to play defense. I don't think anything has changed on that end to make Nurse feel like he can now depend on him.
Yeah, you spoke about defense, and speaking of defense, Chris Boucher was, he was literally left out to dry tonight. The perimeter defense was lacking badly. The rotations were really bad. And a lot of times it just felt like Boston players were almost attacking Chris Boucher, picking on him in the paint. It felt like every single, rim protection came from Chris Boucher at one point or another. But speaking of Chris Boucher, that was his defense. Offensively, he was a total matchup nightmare, Warren.
Yeah.
He had 30 points. I think that was the most points in the entire game. He was shot 11 for 15, 5 for 9 from 3. So another good shooting night from the perimeter for Chris Boucher. 5 rebounds, not a block, which is really surprising for Chris Boucher. But like I said, he led the team in the plus-minus category. We spoke about Norm having, a good offensive game, not great. But I wanted to mention Chris Boucher, and I wanted to hear your thoughts on how he played tonight.
Yeah, I mean, what he did offensively was pretty crazy, but no. What he did offensively was really good. Like,
Yeah.
Boston's defense was pretty questionable in terms of leaving him open so many times at the perimeter, but he made them pay. He killed them in the pick and roll too. Like Tristan Thompson's not a very good pick and roll defender. I think this is actually the play I was thinking of, where I don't know if they knew, if you could play that clip longer. I don't know if they knew if they were supposed to switch it or if they were just supposed to recover. But either way, Boucher read it because he just slips it. As soon as there's a moment of hesitancy, he slips the screen and rolls. And then, Thompson's not that fast to recover to that. So he played great offensively. And if he can just bring you that off the bench every night, that's all you really want from him. Defense, there was some mistakes for sure. Still a little too willing to jump off his feet and go for the block. Jaylen Brown got him on that one where he bit on the pump fake, and then Jaylen just got the foul shots.
Mm-hmm.
So defensively, like I've brought this up before, Boston's incredibly smart in terms of like using the pick and roll to their advantage. They kill bigs who can't really who aren't elite pick and roll defenders. And I would say Boucher has played himself in this season into a pretty good pick and roll defender, but still have Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. Like they're so fast, they're so agile, they're so crafty that they're going to make bigs look stupid regardless of how good they play it.
Yeah. And, we talked about Chris Boucher and how good he looked. You talk about that clip. I mean, Chris Boucher, to me, if you don't have Chris Boucher, remember last night, the way that game ended against Detroit, I was talking about, tomorrow against Boston, if we play anywhere near this bad, it's going to be a 40-point blowout. Chris Boucher has a so-so game. This might be a 30, 20-point blowout for Toronto. So the fact that Chris Boucher had a great game, honestly, Oren, I'm not starting to I don't realize, or I don't understand, I should say, why teams have not clocked that Chris Boucher is shooting near 50% from three this season. I mean, he's shooting somewhere between 40 and 50, and we know that's probably not sustainable, but he's probably going to end around that 40 mark by the time the season ends. Why is he still getting all these open looks? Obviously, he got a lot more looks than usual just off of sheer usage, but I just don't understand why that would happen. But I'm not going to ask you anything about Chris Boucher anymore.
The one,
Lowry.
well, just real quick, Zarar just played one more clip that was going to be the X's and O's thing I did, which is you say, like, why don't teams play him at the three-point line a bit more? And I agree with that, but he's also become so much better at attacking closeouts that when people do run him off the three-point line, in the clip you guys just saw, he just pump fakes and then puts the ball on the floor for 2 dribbles, and he can get to the rim so easily if you give him time or that space to put the ball on the floor. So that's something he's added this year that he never used to have, that makes him a lot harder to defend, because if you close out a little too hard, he's by you for a layup.
He's blowing past you for a layup. We talked about Norm Powell, talked about Stanley Johnson, talked about Terrence Davis, talked about the overall game, Chris Boucher. Norm Powell is a guy we touched on a little bit. Kyle Lowry, I want to talk about a little bit more because, honestly, Oren, he didn't have a great shooting night, but he is literally, Oren, to me at least, and this might sound homerish, but to me, he's probably the 3rd best game manager in the entire league after LeBron and Chris Paul. And I'm not just saying this off of his assist numbers. I'm saying this just in terms of his ability to control a game, control the pace, dictate, everything on the floor. He's so stoic. He shows no emotion, whether he hits a shot or whatever it is. Good play. Shot IQ is incredible. Obviously, he didn't shoot the ball that well, but his shot IQ is, incredible. He missed a lot of shots in this game, but he probably, would hit in most games. But just constantly being aware of what soft spots or mismatches to attack, in the defensive structure of teams and whatever personnel Boston threw out there, no matter who was in the game, just speaks to his elite IQ. Even though Kyle Lowry didn't shoot well, Oren, in this game, did you like the way he distributed the ball? Did you like the way he was seeing the floor?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, he carried them as much as he could. There was times where he was going shot for shot with Tatum.
Yeah.
There was times when he was setting up Boucher, with these behind the back bounce passes for the open threes. He was doing everything he could, but to me, it felt like every time Kyle, made a really nice play, found a guy, they hit a shot, they would come back on the defensive end and just, commit a silly foul or give up an offensive rebound. So they were never gaining traction, no matter really what Kyle did. And that was the difference between a guy like Tatum, who they gain traction because after Tatum hits a nice shot, they go and they get a stop and they get the rebound. And it's really hard to win when you're making so many mistakes defensively.
So many mistakes defensively. This actually brings me, Oren, to a segment I didn't get a chance to do yesterday, and honestly, I didn't do it I didn't do it deliberately because the GM segment, no one's trying to be Troy Weaver, GM of the Detroit Pistons. Nobody's trying to ask what route the Detroit Pistons are taking in the future. I actually am a fan of a lot of their pieces. I like Sadiq Bey. I like Killian Hayes, who's injured. But we are bringing back that segment tonight. So, Oren, I'm going to ask you a very simple question. You're the GM of the Boston Celtics. Most, I want to say, pundits, most experts are looking at you guys as buyers in the trade market. A couple more pieces to Boston, they probably challenge and come out of the East. A lot of people are talking about a center. A lot of people are talking about, a scoring forward, I guess you could say, a scoring wing, a playmaking wing. I'm going to ask you, what is your priority as a buyer in the trade market? And if you are going to make any trades, what type of players are you willing to get rid of? Are you okay with getting rid of a Peyton Pritchard, a Grant Williams, who's been a pretty good role player all season, Time Lord Robert Williams? What guys are you looking at for Boston?
I think they need to be willing to get rid of everyone outside of their big three, who I would say is Marcus Smart, Brown, Tatum, including Kemba Walker, because I think some of what he does at least is just kind of overshadowed by the fact that these other guys can run pick and roll and they can run it better than him. So he's really just a spot up shooter for most of the games, and you can find better spot up shooters who aren't as defensive liabilities as he is. But that's such a big contract; it's really unlikely that's going to get moved, I would say. They have this trade exception, so they can pretty much fit anyone in without sending out salary. In terms of a guy, like, they have three. I think it's pretty interesting that Daniel Tice played 7 minutes tonight. He's good. Like, he's really good. On Toronto, he would be far and away our best center. Like, not close.
To have a Daniel Tice, Oren, oh my goodness, that's how down bad we are. And Daniel Tice, don't get me wrong, he's a good player. He played really well against the Raptors in the bubble, if people remember. But damn, the things I would do for a Daniel Tice.
And they have three centers who are, I would say, about as good right now. They probably want to hold on to Robert Williams just because he's young and he's probably their future center. But definitely guys like Pritchard, guys like Grant Williams, Semi Ojeleye, you have to be willing to give up these guys because they're all likely just going to be like good role players in the NBA. They're not going to like put you over the edge. And what Boston's essentially done is keep all their picks, not trade them, draft these guys who we're talking about, and build a team that is, okay. These guys don't complement their best players very well. I think, it was funny seeing Boston kind of lose a bunch of games recently and everyone freak out. And there was talk like, are Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, can they prop up their teammates? I don't know if you saw this stuff on Twitter. Like, are they good playmakers? Can they ever be good enough to help their teammates succeed instead of going into ISO mode? And the only thing I ever thought of that talk was maybe give them better teammates. That's really it. You need to find better guys who can't just do one thing offensively, more versatile guys who can move the ball quicker. We saw it tonight where Toronto put pressure on guys like Williams or Peyton Pritchard to move the ball, and they just threw it out of bounds by 2 feet. So I think, honestly, it's hard for me to answer that question because I think they could use both. I think they could use another perimeter guard. I think they could use another wing. I think they're right now their depth is really bad. And I think as soon as one of those guys is out for injury, they're going to be in trouble.
Do you like, Oren, the DeRozan? Because I've been seeing DeRozan's been all over the trade rumors. He's the guy that's on a team that's likely not making the playoffs in the San Antonio Spurs. I mean, they're in the picture right now, but when it really gets down to the nitty-gritty, people don't really see them coming out of it.
That's sick. Don't even ask me that. Don't ask me that. That's sick.
Do you like the DeRozan fit on the Boston Celtics, Oren?
I would be sick to see that. But I don't think with DeRozan, he's on an expiring contract, so I feel like you don't want to give away a lot of assets. And I think the Spurs are good. They're a playoff team, so I don't think they're giving him up for nothing. Mm-hmm. So you don't want to give up a lot of assets unless he's going to re-sign there. But I don't know why DeRozan gets killed so much, but I think he would help. He is
incredible. He's incredible. I've watched DeRozan now, Oren, and I could confidently say that he's one of the best playmaking wings in the league. He's completely changed his game from what we saw 5, 6, 7 years ago. In terms of just being a pure, I want to say 2-level scorer, not necessarily 3, but
he's a good example of if you could switch him out for Kemba, I think they're better. I just think they're straight up better.
I agree. I totally agree. One more thing, Oren, before I get to the next segment. Do you like the Nikola Vucevic fit on Boston, the hypothetical fit there? Because I know a lot of people have been asking about that as well.
Yeah, I saw that they were interested in him. I like it. It's interesting because they've always had defensive-minded centers who can't shoot. They've never had a spread 5. I can't remember the last shooting 5 who they've had. But that offensively could be stupid. Giving Brown and Tatum that much room, and even Kemba too, that much room to work with inside, that much spacing, it could be really, really killer defensively and or offensively. And if you can also play like a guy like Grant Williams at the 4, make up for a lot of those defensive things that Vooch doesn't do so well, I think you're pretty good.
Yeah, I love that fit. I love the Vucevic fit. You know, I tweeted about it earlier this week. But again, I hate the Boston Celtics just naturally, you know, being from Toronto. So I'm not a fan of them picking up anyone. I'd rather them just keep it status quo. But let's get to the next segment, Ornan. And that
but wait, and alternatively, they trade a bunch of assets for someone. That person walks away. They start going to shit, and then Tatum and Brown are like, "All right, we want to go to Toronto," and then that's the dream.
I would love that. Jaylen Brown's one of my favorite players in the league, so I would absolutely love that. I speak highly about Jaylen Brown all the time.
Seems like a good guy.
It used to be a clear-cut thing in terms of. I mean, it still is. I think a lot of people would obviously say Jason Tatum's still a better player than Jaylen Brown, but Jaylen Brown's getting there, man. He's really getting there in terms of being an all-around player. So I'm a big fan of his, Oren. I wanted to get into the turning point of the game, Oren, which in this one, I hate doing turning point, to be honest, when we lose, because it's like I have to find the best, essentially, Boston Celtics highlight of the game or whatever team it is. So I'm going to get into the wrap-up turning point of the game, which was involved Jason Tatum, it involved Grant Williams, it involved, unfortunately, Baines and Chris Boucher. It started off with a Tatum. It was a bad pass, Jason Tatum to Grant Williams, which resulted in a turnover. Baines ends up corralling the ball, and he passes it up the floor to Chris Boucher. Now, this is where Oren, things just get weird, because you never want to see Chris Boucher dribbling the ball up the floor in transition. At most, you want to see him take 2 dribbles and stop, but he just kept going and going. At that point, every Raptors fan knew something bad was going to happen. Chris Boucher was totally out of control, turned the ball over. If you didn't see that coming, I don't know if you're a Raptors fan or if you've ever seen Chris Boucher dribble a ball. Celtics ended up retrieving the ball off the Raptors turnover. It ended up in a very nice, little side shuffle Tatum 3. And Toronto going, up to that point, they were making a nice little comeback.
Mm-hmm.
But that was the dagger, Oren. That was the dagger. Toronto couldn't recover for the rest of the game. Celtics maintained their lead. I don't know what to say about that play. It was deflating. It sucked. But I know you wanted to get into some stuff as well.
Well, no. Well, let's just do this. But I think I agree that is the turning point, even though it's pretty early in the game. But I think that's on Baines, because you even see the way that Boucher is running. He's expecting someone to run with him and feed him the ball when he's close to the rim. But you can't put him in the position where he has to dribble the ball down the court and then be a decision maker, because all you have to think about is, okay, who's the backup? Who's the guy who backs me up at the 5? This guy. How many 5s can really run the floor like that? Definitely not Chris Boucher. So it's just stupid decision-making, especially on Baines' part. And, mistakes. Lots of mistakes today.
Lots of mistakes. I keep looking back at the score, and the depression just kicks in one more time, 132 to 125. Oren, is there anything else you wanted to finish up with before we wrap it up here?
I guess just I saw Eric Koreen tweeted basically that you better hope that the Raptors get healthy and kind of get over these COVID symptoms if they have it as quickly as possible, in order to see what this group looks like before the trade deadline. Because we started to get some good data, #data, before these guys went out for COVID, but it wasn't many games. It was only about 5 games when they were all healthy, and they were starting to play really well. So that's not really enough to decide the whole balance of your season and your future. So the Raptors front office better hope that they get a better sample size to work with before the trade deadline happens, because if this is all we have to work off of and we need to know whether they're buyers or sellers, I think that's going to be extremely hard to determine, like we talked about at the end of last episode, because right now it feels like a very hard team to pinpoint. Are they close to contention, or are they just middle of the pack, inconsistent team?
Yeah, Before we do totally wrap it up tonight, in a pretty disappointing game for Toronto, we're just going to analyze one more play for our live viewers, and that is, the reaction to one of the 5,000 fouls of this game. This is a new segment, according to our producer, where he just demands things and we kind of follow through. So we're just going to call it the producer demanding things segment. Oren, I think by now there is a clip playing. I'm not watching our live stream, but
I am. It's not yet.
Coming, apparently, according to our producer, that we're going to analyze in a second. See what it is.
All right, let's see. Drum roll, please. Drum roll. Oh, it's coming. It's playing. Okay.
Walker foul. Yeah.
Oh yeah, it was a charge. I mean, it was a block. It should have been a block. Pretty simple. More interesting than this, right? That was pretty clearly he was moving. He was sliding his left foot there. Did you guys see the game last night? The Warriors-Blazers game?
I didn't. I saw the highlight on, I think it was House of Highlights or Bleacher Report. I saw Lillard do Lillard things.
Yeah, so Dame took a charge.
By the way, let me cut you off because I think, honestly, Lillard is the most clutch player in the NBA.
It's not even a discussion.
Okay,
Scoring-wise, it's not a discussion, and that's what pisses me off about, Luka getting in the All-Star game is that, Dame, I think people really underrate that he's the most clutch scorer in the league because people don't really we're talking about the most valuable player. That's one of the most valuable skills is the ability to score at the end of the game. He doesn't even need a screen. People were mentioning how he doesn't even need a screen to get that step back off. So that doesn't let the defense double him. It's just one-on-one because he doesn't ask for the screen. But yeah, at the end of that game, Dame took a charge on Draymond and Twitter was like, I didn't even understand what happened. People were like, charges shouldn't be part of the NBA. And then they were like, Dame was moving when Draymond took off. And I looked it up because I'm like, that's not the rule. It's when they make contact, right?
Yeah.
Because he wasn't moving when they made contact. He was there. So yeah, I mean, I disagree. I think charges can be really fun. What do you think about that idea that charges should be gone from the NBA?
I love charges. What? No way, Oren. There's absolutely no way I'm going to say, especially with Kyle Lowry being, my favorite player of all time. And by the way, Kyle Lowry's been doing this his whole career. This isn't just like our Toronto Raptors thing. He was doing this in Houston. He's always been one of the smallest guys on the court, taking charges all the time. We saw that play earlier where Kemba Walker took the blocking foul, and he's not Kyle Lowry. And I mean, so you're not going to get that call. He wasn't even in position. His foot was sliding. But, to answer your question, hell no. Kyle Lowry, no. Charges I want to see in the game to the end. I want to be 100 years old, and I want to see Kyle Lowry's great-grandson taking a charge in an NBA game.
Yeah, that All-Star game was amazing last year because of charges.
It was. And a lot of Americans complained about that, but I personally don't care. I'm going to wrap it up here, or we literally got into everything today. If you haven't already, guys, check out the All-Star game. Rosters, LeBron and Kevin Durant did draft their teams, so that's cool there. But before you leave us tonight, guys, we want you to like, comment, and subscribe, hopefully, if you're still with us to the end here. We also want to thank our sponsor, Arif Qureshi from Remax.
Get the shirt.
Get the shirt. Get the Minute basketball shirt. I hope I'm saying it right. Samson's probably going to kill me later. I don't know if it's minute or minute. But get the basketball shirt.
He said either one. He said follow your heart.
He said either one. So I'm going to say minute. Get the Minute basketball shirt. In terms of our sponsor, Arif Qureshi is always at the bottom of the screen. His details are there. This was the wrap-up, guys, your Raptors Republic post-game live show where your Toronto Raptors came up short versus the Boston Celtics 132-125. I'm your co-host, Sahal Abdi, here with Oren Weisfeld. We'll see you guys next Thursday after the All-Star break